Exposed. The amazing truth about my son's rejection that transformed our lives forever. The sun hung low in the sky, casting shadows across the worn pavement of the small Midwestern town. Jessica stood at the threshold of their modest home, her fingers twitching at the doorframe. The news had struck her like lightning. Jake's rejection from the prestigious summer science program that he had worked tirelessly for. Months of weekend study sessions, late-night brainstorming, and shared dreams all collapsed in an instant. The weight of disappointment clung to her like a heavy fog, suffocating her thoughts. In a world where success was the beacon of hope, what did Jake's failure say about them? Was she enough as a mother? Was she a failure in her profession as a teacher, tasked with guiding young minds, but unable to steer her own son through the treacherous waters of expectation? The whispers began almost immediately, lacing their lives with shame. In a neighborhood obsessed with education and accolades, rejection was treated like a stain, something to be hidden. Jessica could feel the invasive glances, the subtle chatter about how Jake was once the golden boy who held so much promise. Was he now merely a cautionary tale? The thought consumed her as she paced the living room, heart racing, breath uneven. She had sacrificed so much to give her son the best. Now she grappled with the latent fear that she hadn't done enough. "Am I just a statistic in this town?" she whispered to herself, wrestling with her insecurities. The pressure felt like a vice clamping down, a harsh reminder of the economic struggle that defined their lives. She watched Jake withdraw into himself, his eyes reflecting a turbulent sadness. It was as if his rejection echoed the doubts they both carried, his to be the beacon of hope, hers to defy the odds of single motherhood. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As the day dragged into the night, Jessica sat on Jake's bed, the room dimly lit by a single lamp. She searched his face for answers she couldn't articulate. "What do you feel, Jake? You don't have to mask it," she implored, hoping to breach the invisible wall he had built. He shrugged, a seemingly dismissive gesture, but it weighed heavily on her. She felt her own heart hardening, the pain morphing into something raw and desperate. But then something shifted. Underneath the ache, a flicker of something unexpected surfaced. Jake had always been an incredible storyteller, but the rigid expectations of achievement had smothered that talent. Perhaps now, in this moment of despair, it could regain its breath. Could it become their lifeline? Jessica's mind buzzed with the possibility, the idea that art could flourish in pain, transforming their anguish into something beautiful. But the question loomed. Could they conquer the whispers and redefine what success truly meant? As she watched her son, a storm of emotions froze her in place. How would they navigate this uncharted territory? Could they rebel against the societal norms that defined their worth? They stood on the cusp of something profound, yet the impending avalanche of expectations haunted them both. Would they find the courage to carve a new path, or would they remain ensnared in a culture that judged only by accolades? Their journey had only just begun, and the path forward felt fraught with uncertainty. The dawn broke with an unsettling quiet, the bright hues of morning failing to penetrate the shadows of Jessica's mind. She watched Jake at the breakfast table, the usual sparkle in his eyes replaced by a dull glaze. His hands absently traced the rim of his cereal bowl, the once profound conversations about his dreams now silenced by defeat. She wondered how to shake him from this stupor, how to ignite the remnants of hope that had been extinguished by rejection. "Jake, what about trying something new?" she ventured cautiously. The suggestion hung in the air, a fragile thread in the vast room of their disappointment. "You loved that storytelling workshop last summer, remember?" He hadn't responded, but Jessica noticed the slight raise of his brow, the barest flicker of interest. This was her opening. His creativity had always been a refuge, a safe harbor for both of them amidst life's turbulence. She recalled the night he spun a tale about a brave knight who journeyed across treacherous lands, ultimately finding not gold, but a profound inner strength. A smile tugged at the corners of her mouth. That was Jake at his finest. The idea grew bolder within her, shifting from a mere suggestion to a plan. What if they transformed this hardship into something tangible? Her fingers itched with anticipation as she thought of creating a storytelling project together, a blend of Jake's narrative prowess and her own teaching skills. "We could write a series of stories," she proposed, leaning closer to him, her eagerness unmistakable. Each one could explore different challenges and how to overcome them. Her heart raced. She saw the spark reawaken in his eyes as he hesitated, grappling with the dual weight of loss and the allure of creativity. "I don't know, Mom. What if it's just dumb?" he finally murmured, staring down at his cereal. The familiar sense of inadequacy enveloped Jessica. How could she help him realize that art wasn't without its critics, even if the loudest voice often came from within? "Jake, you won't know unless you try. Besides, it's not about being dumb or smart. It's about expressing who you are. You have an incredible gift. Don't let this rejection strip that away." The words slipped past her lips, and she felt a rush of determination. What struck her most was the sudden realization that their roles had blurred. Here she was, attempting to fortify her son, while she herself was grappling with insecurity and fear. Could this be the turning point where they supported each other through struggles, her lessons wrapped in his stories, their hearts intertwined in a tapestry of resilience? Jake pushed his cereal aside, gaze tracking her intently. What if we truly did this? What if we shared our stories with others? Jessica's pulse quickened. Sharing their struggle and triumph could spark unity among those experiencing similar rejection. "Exactly! Let's create a blog," she exclaimed, excitement igniting her words. "We can showcase your stories, not only to express ourselves, but to connect with others who need a voice." The heaviness lightened from Jake's shoulders as he contemplated her words. He began sketching ideas, and Jessica reveled in the sight of his fingers dancing across the page, its edges filled with the energy she thought had vanished. Their brainstorming unfolded like a magic ritual, deepening their bond while fending off the suffocating grip of societal expectations. But beneath the surface of their budding project lay the gnawing truth that success was still defined by external validation. There was an intrinsic tension building, whispering questions about whether they would find acceptance not just within themselves, but in a world unrelenting in its demands. As the sun climbed higher, illuminating the room, a thought crystallized in Jessica's mind. What if they wasn't just battling rejection, but dismantling the rigid confines of what failure and success meant? As they dove deeper into their creative venture, would they risk becoming the very thing they sought to escape from? The stakes had never felt higher. With each stroke of Jake's pencil, they skated closer to something significant, something entirely their own. But could they withstand the inevitable trials ahead? There was no turning back as the shadows of doubt loomed large. With fresh resolve, Jessica dared to imagine the path before them, heart thudding with anticipation. Would their stories become the catalyst to reclaiming hope? Or would the weight of the world crush their aspirations before they bloomed? The question echoed in her mind, a challenge meant only for them to answer. The first week slipped away like sand through fingers, each day anchoring Jessica and Jake deeper into their project. The blog emerged, a canvas for their narratives, but it was the writing process that unraveled their complexities. Darkness yet lingered, a constant specter of doubt casting shadows over their progress. In the flickering light of the evening, they sat on the worn couch, surrounded by papers and empty mugs. Jake's face contorted in frustration. "Mom, I don't know if I can actually do this. What if no one reads our stories? What if I'm just not good enough?" His words pierced Jessica, not solely for their implication, but for the pang of familiarity they sparked. She had lived that fear, nestled within her own self-doubt since her career in education had seemingly stagnated. In her heart, however, flickered an ember of resilience, an understanding that striving was a journey, fragmented by false parameters of success. "Jake," she began, carefully selecting her words, "every writer faces rejection. It's part of the process. What matters is our commitment to the craft. We don't write for others, we write for ourselves first. This is our exploration." Determination igniting her spirit, she reached for her own notebook. "Why don't we both write a story tonight? A flash piece, something that captures a moment we wish had gone differently." She paired this with a realization. It was time she confronted her own fear through the obstacles they shared. Jake's eyes narrowed in thought. "Okay. But what if I wrote about the rejection? The first thing that comes to mind." The vulnerability in his words inspired warmth in Jessica's chest, reflecting the same revelation that had illuminated her own reservations. They were dancing in a precarious ballet of healing, navigating their respective fears through storytelling. The hours brimmed with creativity, and the atmosphere shifted from hesitation to electric eagerness. Words flowed like a river, unfiltered and tangible. In those moments, Jessica witnessed Jake wielding his pen with renewed fervor, articulating the pain of rejection, framing his experience as a stepping stone rather than a stumbling block. When they finally shared their stories aloud, the tension cracked, and their laughter resounded like a resilient heartbeat in the room. Jessica felt a sense of liberation. As they explored realms of imagination where disappointments transformed into transformations, she discovered something within herself. "Mom, I think we actually have something here," Jake murmured, a gleeful blush creeping to his cheeks. "It's like we're pulling at threads of our lives, weaving hope into something real." "Yes!" she exclaimed, her voice laden with excitement. "We're redefining our narratives, reshaping our definitions of success. It isn't about how many readers we have. It's about our connection to our stories." But as the thrill surged through them, a darker question lurked within Jessica's mind, insistent and unyielding. Were they merely sidestepping the realities of their struggles, instead of confronting the looming fear of failure? What if they exposed their vulnerabilities only to face ridicule or worse, silence? Each story they penned together was a testament to blossoming self-awareness, yet with every loose thread they tugged, discomfort bloomed. The shadows of doubt remained entwined with their ambitions, beginning to cloud her burgeoning enthusiasm. As they drafted their blog posts, Jessica felt the weight of disclosure pressing down on her chest. What if Jake's story stirred critics to grapple with their own truths? Would they both find themselves at the mercy of others' perceptions? The impending release of their stories fanned the flames of anxiety. What if this endeavor seeded something unanticipated or threatened to unravel their newfound connection? Staring at their freshly written tales, the looming decision settled heavily in the air. Dare they embrace this newfound path, or would the fear of rejection paralyze them at the threshold of their creation? Jessica inhaled deeply, aware this moment would shape not only their relationship, but their identities. "Tomorrow," she whispered, firming her resolve to press forward. "Tomorrow we share it with the world." But as the words left her lips, uncertainty twined around them, an insistent reminder that the moment of truth loomed dangerously close, both exhilarating and terrifying. What awaited them on the other side of their vulnerability? The dawn brought an unsettling clarity, a stark contrast to the haze of excitement that had enveloped Jessica and Jake the night before. As sunlight cut through the curtains, illuminating the room, she found herself re-evaluating the notion of exposure. What lay ahead was not merely an online publication or a fleeting moment of attention. It was bearing their souls, threads of vulnerability stretched tight against the sharp edges of judgment. Jessica sat at the small kitchen table, her heart racing with mixed emotions. She faced Jake across the expanse of the table, their laptops open to the pages they had written. The day loomed large, pregnant with possibility, but also rife with potential rejection. The chance to share their work with the world shimmered before her, but doubt whispered malevolently at the edges of her mind. "Are you sure you want to do this?" she asked, her voice low, careful to conceal her own uncertainty. "Once we hit publish, there's no going back." Jake furrowed his brow, his youthful innocence fighting against the gravity of the situation. "I have to. If I don't, it'll always be something I didn't try." He paused, his youthful determination momentarily faltering. "But what if people don't understand? What if they think I'm a joke?" His words struck Jessica, echoing her own fears. Their narratives weren't just stories. They were intimate reflections of their lives, weighted with personal history. Rejecting that vulnerability would mean allowing doubt to win again. "There's a possibility of misunderstanding, yes," she acknowledged solemnly. "But if we don't express ourselves, we risk always wondering what could have been." Jake considered her words, the tension in his shoulders easing slightly as he leaned back in his chair. "You really believe that?" "I do," she replied, a newfound steadiness rising in her. She realized that her belief wasn't rooted in optimism, but in a profound understanding of the human experience. Taking risks often exposed us to discomfort, but those experiences also cultivated growth. With a deep breath, Jessica closed her laptop. The act felt significant, final. "Okay, let's do something different. Before we publish, let's read our stories again, like it's the first time. Let's remind ourselves why we wrote them." Jake nodded, apprehension shifting into a fresh resolve. As they read their stories aloud, the words took on new meanings. They weren't just about rejection, they illuminated the resilience that came through facing fears head-on. Each line became a touchstone, reinforcing their shared commitment to authenticity. "It's okay to be scared," Jessica said, resonating with the depth of her own thoughts. "But we owe it to ourselves to let these words fly." As the sun rose higher, its warmth bathed the room in a golden hue, filling the space with comfort and courage. They finished their readings, both entwined in a silence pregnant with anticipation. Could they truly do this? The moment of truth rested on a precipice. "Let's make this an act of defiance," Jake suggested, his voice steadier, the decision crystallizing in the charged air. "Let's share our stories without fear. No filters, just us." Jessica felt a swell of pride for her son and for herself. This wasn't merely about their blog. It symbolized a liberation from the chains of past insecurities. They weren't just narrating their experiences, they were rewriting their futures. Hand in hand, they hovered over the publish button, a threshold to collective vulnerability. It was the sinew that held their new dynamic together, a binding contract of trust between them. But as their fingers lingered just above the keys, doubt crept back in, coiling tightly around Jessica's heart. What if the world didn't embrace their truth? Swallowing, she found a measure of steadiness. She recognized that worrying about potential reactions would only let fear back into their well-crafted moments. "Ready?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Jake's eyes sparkled with a mix of trepidation and excitement. "Ready." With a shared breath, they pressed the button. The stories were out there, adrift in the vast ocean of the internet, free to ride the waves of inquiry and critique. However, what awaited on the other side? Would their leap of faith solidify their connection or expose them to deeper fears they hadn't yet encountered? The realm beyond their vulnerability beckoned, cloaked in the unknown, a truth yet to unfold, both exhilarating and terrifying. The hours following their publication felt like a vast expanse of uncertainty stretching into an uncharted future. As the darting notifications echoed faintly from their laptops, Jessica could hear her heart beating, each thump an echo of her anticipation and dread. They had ventured into an open sea, their stories bobbing on the waves of the internet. But now, they were left to grapple with the quiet aftermath. Jake remained enthralled, eyes glued to feedback streaming in from their tiny audience. His enthusiasm was a beacon of hope, cutting through Jessica's clouded thoughts. She watched him, noting how each like and comment seemed to inflate his confidence. Yet, the comments still felt like a double-edged sword. What if the feedback twisted into ridicule? She caught herself gripping the edge of the table, feeling the sting of vulnerability creep back into her mind. "You okay, Mom?" Jake's voice broke her concentration, pulling her from the tumult of her thoughts. "Yeah, just thinking," she replied, forcing a smile. "It's just the waiting, I suppose." "Just remember, it's about us being brave," he said, almost as if sensing her anxiety as he tapped away at his laptop. "We shared what we believe in. That's what matters." His unwavering optimism stirred something within her. Somewhere beneath her worry, beneath the fear of judgment, was a glimmer of empowerment. She caught herself tracing the lines of her own story in her mind, each moment of fear, resilience, and growth. It was the very essence of their leap forward, a testament to their journey. It needed to be celebrated rather than feared. Still, the hours crawled by, and Jessica's heart raced with tension every time a ping echoed through the room. What if none of it mattered? What if they had risked everything for nothing? Yet deep down, she knew that in exposing their truths, they weren't seeking validation. They were cultivating authenticity. What could be more valuable than that? The sun dipped lower in the sky, and with it, the weight of day began to etch deeper lines on her face. It was a reminder that time travel in this digital age bore consequences. They were in an uncharted territory, a place demanding patience and resolve amidst uncertainty. "Let's head out," she suggested suddenly, pushing back from the table. "We could both use some fresh air." Jake paused, glancing at the screen filled with notifications. "But what if—" "No what-ifs. Come on," she urged, surprising herself with her insistence. As they stepped outside, the cool air enveloped them like a soothing balm. Jessica took a deep breath, letting nature eclipse her anxiety. They walked down the block, surrounded by the sounds of children laughing and cars bustling. It was a jarring shift from their earlier digital confinement. Mid-walk, her phone buzzed violently in her pocket, a notification. Unable to resist, she pulled it out, her heart lurching at the sight of her own name splashed across the screen. A message from a reader had appeared, a long, heartfelt note about how their stories resonated, how perhaps for the first time, someone felt less alone. "Mom, what is it?" Jake leaned closer, curiosity sparking in his eyes. She held up the phone, reading the words aloud. With each sentence, her fears melted a little more. The connection they sought had just ignited in the most beautiful way possible, a reflection of the very courage they had summoned to share their truths. Yet, as she finished reading, doubt still loomed. What if this was just the calm before a storm? What if not everyone felt as the reader did? Were they prepared for the inevitable backlash that came with honesty? The world was vast and often harsh, but perhaps this projection of vulnerability was precisely what both she and Jake needed to brave the journey ahead. "Let's keep walking," she said finally, grabbing her son's hand. "I want to keep hearing what people think." His face lit up, and together they resumed their stride, courage rekindled with each step, but that dark shadow of doubt still lingered, waiting for its moment. Would they stand resilient against the negative tide, or would their newfound vulnerability expose them further than they were ready to face? As they turned a corner, a thought struck Jessica. Were they merely beginning to tease out their own tales, or had they triggered a narrative that would unveil much deeper truths? The path ahead remained uncertain, but she sensed an undercurrent stirring, hinting at more complexity than she had anticipated. In the days that followed their story's release, Jessica found herself caught in a whirlwind of emotions. Excitement battled with anxiety as notifications continued to shimmer on her phone like distant stars. Each vibration served as a reminder of the personal stakes involved. Her son's burgeoning confidence hung precariously on the balance of public perception alongside her own. The initial response had been overwhelmingly positive, but beneath that initial glow lay the unsettling specter of harsher criticism lurking just beyond the horizon. Jake, meanwhile, had embraced his side of the digital world wholeheartedly. The likes, comments, and shares energizing him embraced their candid journey as if it were a live performance. Jessica admired his ability to maneuver seamlessly, yet each uplifting notification felt like a weight in her chest, an anchor dragging her down. She often found herself evaluating her own actions. Was she as brave as Jake believed her to be? Or was she merely a shadow of his burgeoning bravery? As they transitioned into their new normal, an unexpected opportunity arose. An online panel discussion featuring various writers, many of whom had found success sharing their vulnerabilities, was coming to town. The topic? Reclaiming personal narratives in a critical world. When Jessica saw the announcement, a flicker of intrigue ignited within. However, it was quickly doused by a wave of doubt. Who was she to present among established voices? She had already struggled to reveal herself within her own small circle, grappling with the frequency of her insecurities. "What do you think, Mom?" Jake's excited voice broke through her introspection as he looked over her shoulder at the screen. "You should do it! What if they don't want to hear from someone like me?" she retorted, her voice thick with self-doubt. The moment the words escaped, she felt a churning urgency. A glimmer of determination fought against her internal defeats. "Are you kidding? You're a storyteller," Jake exclaimed. "You've got amazing things to say. You can do this." His belief felt like a lifeline, a thread from his exuberance pulling her back from the edge of self-doubt. Maybe this was not only about strengthening their narratives, but confronting her fears head-on. Each moment shared with Jake, filled with their raw experiences, was a building block in a larger conversation about honesty and vulnerability. Jessica felt the tug-of-war within her. As she weighed her options, she returned to her thoughts about the digital age, an unconventional sea of opportunity lapping at her feet. Reflection on her own journey and acceptance of her multifaceted identity sparked within her. The impulse to act began to overpower her fears. "I will!" The affirmation slipped from her lips with surprising clarity. With resolve beginning to blossom, Jessica set about preparing for the panel. Each moment of practice before her mirror felt like both a victory and an exposure of vulnerability. The fine line between growth and fear now an agitating reminder of her commitment to authenticity. However, as the date approached, a creeping sensation shadowed her newfound courage. Doubts wormed into her thoughts. Would she deliver her truth effectively? Would she be met with acceptance or the scathing remarks she feared lurking like predators? She found herself at the edge of an excruciating paradox. She could fortify her position on stage or withdraw into retreat, but retreating felt increasingly detrimental. Then, a new email notification appeared, an anonymous comment left on their stories, one that sent her heart spiraling. "I'm ashamed of you for sharing your family's troubles. Keep it private." Everything she was preparing for felt endangered. Confronting negativity was one aspect. Realizing how easy it was to lose sight of self-belief amidst unsolicited judgments was another layer altogether. With tremors coursing through her, Jessica faced a crossroads. Was she ready to risk her authenticity in front of strangers, all for the sake of connection? Just as she considered her next move, the phone buzzed again. An unexpected name popped up on the screen, compelling her to confront a truth that loomed larger than herself. Could she transform this moment of potential pain into a lesson of resilience? What awaited them on that stage would challenge everything she thought she knew about bravery. She took a deep breath, clutching the phone tightly, and whispered to herself, "It's time to be brave again." With the panel discussion just days away, Jessica felt a tempest brewing in her chest, a blend of anticipatory anxiety and a flicker of resolve that she'd newly fostered. As she practiced her speech in front of the mirror, the reflection that stared back was both familiar and foreign. Each time she rehearsed, she marveled at how her face seemed to form into the perfect mask of confidence. Yet beneath that mask lay the haunting question: how would the audience perceive her story? Months of sharing their experiences had sharpened her storytelling, but the shadow of that cruel comment loomed like a specter. "I'm ashamed of you for sharing your family's troubles." The words echoed repeatedly in her head, colliding with her daughter's spirited reassurance, further complicating her emotions. Could a mumble of disbelief from an anonymous source really define her worth as a storyteller? She was struck by an unsettling truth. This panel was more about her than merely expressing their struggles. It was about seeking validation, not only from the audience, but also from herself. Each time she rehearsed, she caught herself steering toward a diluted version of their story, shying away from its raw edges, afraid that the jagged pieces might invite scorn. In an attempt to drown out her fears, Jessica decided to seek focus through action. She pulled Jake into the conversation later that night. "What do you think makes our story different?" she asked, trying to bypass the weight of her doubts through dialogue. Jake, who had been wrapped in his world of accumulating likes and fanfare, looked at her with a seriousness that belied his age. "Because it's real, Mom. It's messy, but that's what makes it worth telling." Messy. Jessica tasted the word like a forgotten recipe. It felt potent and liberating. Perhaps it was time to fully embrace their vulnerability, allow herself to reveal not just their triumphs, but the struggles that made them human. With Jake's words echoing in her mindset, she sat down to reframe her notes. No more glossing over the discomfort. She decided to delve into the gritty reality, the sleepless nights, the unconditional love woven through sorrow, and the breakthroughs they attained together. This would be her truth. Each revelation felt like peeling an onion, layers of fear unfurling and exposing the depth of her own resilience. The day of the panel dawned, heavy with the weight of anticipatory quiet. As she stood backstage, she could hear the murmurs of the audience, their curious whispers swirling into a collective hum that made her skin prickle. Jessica shivered, grappling with the duality of excitement and dread. She practiced her breathing, an exercise she learned from Jake, grounding herself in this moment that could redefine her. Waiting for her turn felt like standing on the edge of a high cliff, with every instinct whispering to leap. Would she soar or crash? When her name finally rang through the air, Jessica felt her courage surge, filling her lungs as she walked towards the stage. The lights warmed her face, and the sea of unfamiliar expressions washed over her, melding into a single entity, an audience ready to listen. "I used to think sharing our pain would only bring shame." The words unfurled naturally, unlocking her heart and echoing the internal dialogue she struggled to contain. The vulnerability within her voice drew attentive gazes. The authentic cadence felt freeing. Minutes slipped away as she shared the beauty within their chaos. She spoke of kindness and the camaraderie woven through shared struggles. Her story flowed like a river, carving its own path through rugged terrain, unfiltered and raw. As she concluded, a wave of applause enveloped her, warmth pouring from a sea of empathy. But as she exited the stage, she felt a pressing need to confront the horizon beyond this moment. Would their story continue to resonate? Backstage, the anxious knots in her stomach unfurled into curiosity as she pondered the journey ahead. How far could they go in embracing their truth? What challenges awaited on the path of authenticity? As she stepped away from the spotlight, a vibrancy crackled in the air. The phone buzzed in her pocket, another comment. With a mix of trepidation and excitement, she pulled it out. What would the world think now? Her heart raced. Another twist in her narrative awaited. Jessica stared at her phone, the luminescent screen illuminating her face like a spotlight on stage. The notification was from a social media thread that had sprung up post-panel. Her heart thudded as she tapped it open, hoping for praise, but bracing for the inevitable backlash. Why would anyone want to hear about your family's failures? It wasn't just a rejection, it was a challenge, a confrontation that sent a shiver down her spine. She inhaled a deep breath, reminded of her own words shared moments ago about the power of messy stories. Yet the sting of public rejection threatened to undermine her newfound resolve. The applause from her speech still echoed around her, but the comment loomed larger, like a rain cloud ready to drench her in doubt. Suddenly propelled by anger rather than fear, she felt the urge to respond, not with a defensive retort, but with an understanding of where this sentiment stemmed from. Reflections of her own doubts stared back at her. Instead of retreating into a shell of self-doubt, she decided to delve deeper. She remembered back when she felt compelled to share a story that almost felt like a betrayal. The rawness of truth had always been a double-edged sword. It cut deep, but could also free. The very idea of embracing their imperfections was what made her story valuable, yet she was still battling the remnants of shame. Taking a moment to steady herself, she pressed her phone again. Whether you're ashamed or inspired, we all have stories that merit being told. It's what connects us. She hit send, feeling a mixture of vulnerability and empowerment. But there was no retreat now. She had opened a door. Jessica's voice quivered with intent, a call to conversation rather than combat. Perhaps it was time to explore not only their narrative, but also the responses to it. What if she could galvanize discussions around those messy truths, transforming disdain into understanding? The thought sparked an idea. She envisioned hosting a small, informal gathering, a storytelling workshop for families that had walked similar paths. It would be a space where people could trade their uncertainties and triumphs, where the weight of judgment could dissipate, shifting instead to shared experiences. Equipped with her story and her hard-won resilience, Jessica felt that she could facilitate these exchanges, helping others reclaim their narratives. But as she considered this ambitious step, waves of doubt flowed over her. Who was she to lead others in vulnerability? A specter of self-doubt whispered the cruel reminder. What if it failed? What if she was, as a particularly nasty comment had suggested, not enough? Jake approached her cautiously, his youthful face mirroring the mixture of concern and love. "Mom, you okay?" "Yes, just processing," she replied, attempting a gentle smile. "You know it's totally okay to feel scared, right? But what if your story helps someone else?" His innocent belief in her capability lit a spark within Jessica. Her son's unwavering faith made her realize that authenticity reached beyond personal stakes. It could help others embrace their narratives too. Reflecting on these newfound intentions sent shivers of anticipation coursing through her. She envisioned her workshop, a platform not just for her story, but an incubator for healing and empowerment. A thought ignited. What would this space offer them? "Maybe it won't just be about me," she said aloud, surprising even herself with the thought. "I could include others, create a tribe of storytellers." The concept transformed from a mere idea to a mission. As excitement coursed through her veins, she reached for her notepad, ready to sketch out a plan. But the tension still loomed. The looming fear of inadequacy threatened to accompany her. Battling uncertainty would be her constant companion, a reminder of her humanity. Just as she began to write, her phone buzzed once more. A new message. It wasn't merely a notification. It was a sentence ending in a question mark. "Will you invite me to this workshop?" The question hung in the air as Jessica's heart raced. Who could it be? Would this be a moment of connection or another harsh remark? Instinctively, she exhaled, still suspended between trepidation and resolve. Her next step could change everything. Jessica held her breath, staring at the message that flickered on her screen. It felt like a tightrope walk, balancing between hope and the fear of further scrutiny. Her thumb hovered over the response button, heart racing, as she contemplated the implications. The invitation to her envisioned workshop could either be an acceptance of her idea or another nail in the coffin of her confidence. "Think, Jessica," she whispered to herself. "Whoever this is, they see value in your notion." She tapped the message open. As she read the name, Samantha, A fellow parent she had met briefly but had shared heart-wrenching tales of her own. The uncertainty softened. Perhaps this connection was a lifeline. With a deep breath, she typed back, "Definitely. Let's talk about what this could look like." Momentarily, a wave of exhilaration washed over her. The realization that she wasn't alone in this endeavor felt unusual, yet liberating. She eased into the concept of shared storytelling, visualizing Samantha sitting there, recounting her truths, while other voices joined in. As anticipation began to fill the void left by anxiety, Jessica sensed an unfamiliar energy building within her. She imagined the faces of participants, individuals from various walks of life who had also faced their share of failures and triumphs. They weren't merely stories, they were experiences intertwined, threads ready to weave a tapestry of collective strength. But then, doubt crept back in. Would they truly come? Was her idea substantial enough to warrant their time? The juxtaposition between excitement and skepticism tugged at her insides. Determined to break the cycle of negativity, she reached for her notepad again, this time with more zeal. Jessica listed ideas for the workshop, themes around vulnerability, prompts to oh-so-gently pry open the lids of shame and judgment, and methods to facilitate sharing. As she penned her thoughts, clarity solidified her vision. "I'll need a venue," she muttered, tearing ideas from her mind like leaves from a tree. "Somewhere warm, inviting." The quaint community center flashed in her mind, a cozy space that exuded friendliness among the cold edges of critique. Picturing the setting, she thought about how community rooms thrived on the connection fostered within their walls. She jotted down notes, her pen scratching furiously, tension dissipating with each stroke. But how would she present such an unorthodox gathering? What if someone challenged her credentials, just as those comments had? Would she falter under the weight of scrutiny? The self-questioning cascaded relentlessly, but she had to push through. In the stillness of her living room, something shifted. The darkness began receding. An inner voice rose defiantly within her, affirming her right to take this leap. Who can guide them better than someone who has faced similar storms? The realization surged, a crucial revelation that stoked the fires of courage. She was more than just an observer. She embodied a bridge between isolation and understanding. Late that night, with ideas becoming broader, she felt the pull of community. Perhaps this could become a regular event, a catalyst for emotions left unfelt, a sanctuary for stories yet unshared. She even pictured inviting guest speakers, individuals who had turned their past pain into purposeful narratives. And then, an unexpected distraction. Her phone rang again, the sound echoing in her quiet space. This message was from Jake. His sweet and cheeky selfies flashed onto her screen. "Mom, I'm planning something special for the workshop, can't wait." Warmth filled her chest, but with it came a weighty contemplation. Was she ready to integrate her son's energy into something so personal? The thought provoked both fear and elation all at once. Jessica leaned back, staring at the workshop plan, now sprawling across her notepad. She questioned her ability to maneuver through the world of vulnerability and authenticity with her son by her side. Could their joined stories become a pathway, igniting other families to tell their own? The sheer possibility of this endeavor gripped her. As her heart surged with hope, she realized she was already taking critical steps, embracing both the messy and enlightening sides of storytelling. Yet lurking within this newfound brightness remained a gnawing thought. What if her vulnerability dragged her down deeper into the abyss of rejection? The very fear she aimed to confront refused to let go. As she made arrangements with Samantha for the workshop, an unsettling excitement thrummed through her. The real test awaited her, one where she would stand vulnerable in front of others and share her story. The message she had once thought of as a dismissal now simmered with endless potential. Jessica's resolve grew stronger as she faced the looming uncertainties of this new venture. "Maybe this is the moment I was waiting for," she mused, closing her notebook and glancing at her phone for any updates. But who else might join her journey? Would anyone else be willing to step into this space of vulnerability with her? Her thoughts sparked with the potential of the unknown, but the gnawing question remained unanswered. What if the very moment she embraced vulnerability became her undoing? The day of the workshop dawned bright, while Jessica's heart raced alongside the sun's ascension. The space was adorned with cheerful decorations, tables draped with soft fabrics, and chairs set in a circle, an inviting layout designed to foster connection. Yet, behind the warmth of the setup lay a churning storm of uncertainty. What if no one came? What if she stumbled while sharing her story? But as soon as she saw the first few participants trickling in, all doubts began to dissipate. There was an unmistakable shift in atmosphere as each person took their seat, creating a tapestry woven from shared anxiety and hopefulness. "Hey, you're not alone in this," Jake whispered, arriving with a bright smile and a stack of handwritten prompts he had prepared for their storytelling exercises. His presence anchored her, calming the storm within. She took a deep breath and welcomed everyone, establishing an atmosphere of trust. "Thank you for being here. Today is about exploring our stories, the messy, beautiful, and sometimes painful narratives that shape who we are. There's no right or wrong way to share." As she spoke, she could feel moments of warmth threading through her, a realization that she had somehow stepped into a guiding role. The air thickened with a palpable mixture of vulnerability and safety. Halfway through, as participants began sharing their stories, a sense of liberation blossomed, crackling within the room. Each voice, unfurling patterns of pain and resilience, began intertwining, forming a tapestry that whispered of strength through vulnerability. One participant, a single father named Mark, trembled slightly as he recounted his journey of navigating personal loss. "I've always thought I needed to keep a strong face for my kids," he admitted, voice laced with emotion. "But lately, I've realized that it's okay to feel the hurt. It's okay to tell them that my heart is heavy sometimes." Jessica felt a lump rise in her throat, resonating deeply with him. She nodded empathetically, aware that Mark's courage to show his true self was a mirror reflecting the journey she had undertaken with Jake. As the group continued sharing, Jessica watched their emotions unravel, multifaceted stories blooming amidst their fragilities. Jake stepped up beside her during the sharing circle, holding one of his short stories. "I wrote this about how rejection opened the door to something better," he said, confidence radiating from him. The circle responded with silence, their anticipation palpable. As Jake read, Jessica marveled at the depth of his words. The room transformed into an echo chamber of understanding and connection, allowing Jake not just to reclaim his narrative, but embracing it as a source of empowerment. When he finished, the applause resonated like a melody. It signified acceptance, not only of Jake's story, but of the collective experience they had nurtured together. Jessica's heart swelled, the pride she felt surging through her veins like an electric current. As the session drew closer to its end, she understood that the workshop was about more than just storytelling. It had become a sanctuary where vulnerability served as a glue, binding them through shared understanding. The fear that had once paralyzed Jessica began to ease back, replaced instead by a resounding realization. They weren't merely crafting stories. They were weaving a powerful community of resilience. The dialogue that emerged in those hours was rich and layered, discussions ranging from fears of failure to the unmeasurable joys of embracing imperfections. Jessica felt increasingly hopeful, each interaction validating her mission, building the professional confidence she had long questioned. And then came the crowning moment. A participant asked, "How can we continue this?" The question lingered, igniting the previously stifled flame within Jessica. Heart racing, she proposed a recurring meeting, a safe space where stories could continue to flow week after week, cultivating courage and connection. The participants nodded enthusiastically, the momentum unfurling around her like petals reaching towards the light. The overwhelming support stoked a fire in her heart. She realized she had surpassed the limitations she once believed defined her. As they wrapped up, she glanced at Jake, whose eyes sparkled bright with excitement. Together, they had embarked on a transformative journey more profound than she had ever imagined. In this workshop, she recognized the fulfillment of having taken that leap of faith, embracing vulnerability, and allowing their stories to resonate. That evening, Jessica reflected on the day, the nuggets of wisdom exchanged and the bonds formed. She recognized that her initial fear had birthed something beautiful, tangible, and meaningful. In a world often cloaked in judgment, she and Jake had forged a bond deeper than she had ever thought possible, one built on nurturing authenticity, acceptance, and the shared power of storytelling. A sense of gratitude washed over her as she authorized this new venture. Jessica had not only overcome her own insecurities, but discovered a newfound purpose. The craft of storytelling was not just for herself. It was a gift she could share, guiding others toward their own growth and healing. She was no longer simply a mother, she was a facilitator of stories, emboldened by her son's light. It was a declaration of victory, a commitment to growth, connection, and understanding wrapped neatly into simple, poignant narratives that mattered. As she turned off the light to her office that night, Jessica felt an expansive sense of hope fill the air. What started as a shadowy contradiction, birthed from rejection, had matured into a catalyst for authentic connections, a life transformed through storytelling. And as she drifted off to sleep, an excitement bubbled. The journey was far from over. They had only just begun, and her heart brimmed with anticipation for the stories yet to be shared. Now you have an opportunity to be part of this incredible journey. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories that inspire growth and transformation. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and show your support because it makes a huge difference. Comment your reactions and theories about this powerful ending. We want to hear your thoughts. And for goodness sake, share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to elevate this narrative and inspire others. Don't wait even one more second to share.